Well, am I the only one, or does it seem like it was just Memorial Day last week? You know, and here it is July 4th, and of course, you know, I mean, how can it possibly be July 4th? But what I always say is that when it's July 4th, that means Christmas is right around the corner. I don't know why, but after the 4th, the rest of the year just seems to zing right on by. But take some time and pause to really enjoy the 4th of July for what it is. I mean, they call it Independence Day for a good reason. You don't have to hang around other people if you don't want to. You can be independent, or you can hang around other people. Everyone gets to do their own thing. Right? There are no hard and fast rules about what you're supposed to do and what you're supposed to eat on July 4th. So, unlike some of the other holidays, everything is up for grabs on the 4th, right? Some towns have a parade, some don't. You can have a party, a cookout, a picnic, you can go camping, or none of the above. I remember back in 2004 when Karen and I moved here to California, first thing we noticed on July 4th is that your fireworks out here are a little bit different. What is it they call the ones that you can buy?
Safe and sane.
Safe and sane. Safe and sane, which is totally different from the last place we lived, which was outside Kansas City, Missouri. The fireworks in Missouri were what you would call dangerous and insane. By 9 p.m., the neighborhood we lived in, the entire neighborhood was clouded by this thick fog of smoke from all the pyrotechnics that were going off in every which direction. And I mean loud and flashy stuff. I mean, people can actually go out and buy the mortars. Up for grabs, perfectly legal. So it was pretty crazy. And of course, everybody knew where to go for the very best fireworks, right? You know what they say? Guys with eye patches and 3 fingers sell the best fireworks. So that's the guy you'd look up. Anyway, on July 4th, we're free to do as we please. Unless you happen to live in the town where this park is located here. Look at this. July 4th park rules. I don't know where this is. I don't want to go there. July 4th park rules. No generators, propane grills, no tents and shelters. Police will be conducting searches of bags and coolers for reasons of public safety, of course. No alcoholic beverages at any time. No personal fireworks, including novelty fireworks and sparklers. No dogs or pets allowed all day. Skate park, basketball courts, tennis courts, and Kids Cove will close at 7 p.m. before the fun even gets started, right? And the final notice at the bottom, the entire park is under video surveillance. Yeah, okay. Happy Freedom Day. Just make sure you don't have too much fun, and the police will be watching to make sure that you don't have too much fun. Anyway, that's not where we want to go. I'm actually happy. I think it's good to see an entire country setting aside one whole day of the year to celebrate what amounts to a philosophical concept, right? An idea, an abstraction. I asked Google to show me an image of freedom, all right? Here's what I got. Most of the images were variations on these 4 themes that you see up here. Put freedom into Google, click on images, and you'll get mostly stuff that looks like this, right? Some variation on birds, butterflies, a cage, a person standing with their arms raised, a broken chain, a guy on a mountaintop, that kind of thing. It's so abstract that we can only capture it by these kind of vague metaphors, or so it seems. It can't be precisely quantified. Freedom is abstract, and yet it's very real. We all know what it is, even though we can't put it in a box and give it to somebody. Freedom is a great example of what we mean by the word metaphysical. Goes beyond the things that we can measure and quantify. Can't hold it in our hand. It isn't physical. Everyone agrees it's real. So it's metaphysical. It's something that transcends or goes a bit beyond the physical. Now, I don't toss around the word metaphysical too much. I don't use it lightly because the word has been abused and misused in our recent history. Metaphysics has come to be identified almost exclusively these days with the occult and supernatural, when it's actually Historically, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy that deals with abstract things like being, knowing, cause, and identity. Not exactly the kind of thing that gets people excited, right? But you throw in some UFOs and poltergeists and everybody loves metaphysics again. People start paying attention. That's what happens. So here's the somewhat more boring definition of metaphysics that we use in Unity. It comes from our co-founder, Charles Fillmore. He says, metaphysics is the systematic study of the science of being, that which transcends the physical. By pure metaphysics is meant a clear understanding of the realm of ideas and their legitimate expression. That's it. No UFOs, no problem. And now we're getting somewhere because, back to freedom, right? Freedom is something that comes to us from the realm of ideas. One of those timeless core principles that human beings have actually used to form the backbone of a society. Now here's another Unity term that we sometimes use, a term for those timeless principles that come to us from the realm of ideas. This is some more Unity jargon here you might hear from time to time. We call them divine ideas. You've probably heard that expression, divine ideas. Reverend Paul Hasselbeck wrote a book called Heart-Centered Metaphysics, and this is how he defines divine ideas. He says, divine ideas, divine ideas are the fundamental truth that underlie and transcend all physical manifestation. Divine ideas are spiritual or intangible patterns that pertain to all of us. They are all the components known to our mind that constitute what we call good, as in the true, the good, and the beautiful. I added that part in parentheses, or intangible, because I want to try to demystify this word spiritual. I want to make it more practical and demystify it if possible. So I always say that spirituality, or the spiritual, is the intangible side of reality. Reality has two phases, physical and non-physical, tangible or intangible. And by intangible, I'm talking about the realm of values, ideas, aesthetics, and so on. So I think that's another reason why I like the 4th of July so much, because it's really a celebration of a divine idea, freedom, or you can call it liberty. There really is a spiritual aspect to Independence Day. Freedom is a divine idea, one of those fundamental and timeless truths that underlies and transcends all physical manifestations. It fits right in there to those definitions. But it hasn't always been a part of the physical manifest realm, has it? Human beings sometimes have a way of either ignoring or trying to block the legitimate expression of divine ideas, like freedom and many others. A very well-known Unity minister and highly respected teacher at Unity World Headquarters for 27 years was a man named Ed Rabel. Here's Ed Rabel. And he used to say that sin is any attempt to negate a divine idea. Now think about that for a moment. Sin is any attempt to negate a divine idea. That's a pretty enlightened and progressive approach to the word sin. I was raised thinking that sin is always some sort of a moral failing for which you should feel shame, whereas in actuality, it has to do with human conduct, trying to block the legitimate expression of a divine idea. Now remember, divine ideas can't be negated, but we still try. That's where the idea of the sin comes in. We still try. And when we try to do that, when we try to block the legitimate expression of a divine idea, we are working against the common good. And by working against the common good, we're basically working to the detriment of humankind as a whole. You know, there's an old saying that we're not punished for our sins, but by them. When we try to negate divine ideas, we pay a price. That's how it works. So like all divine ideas, freedom is something that humans have been aware of perhaps for all of our existence, but we never put them into expression. We never allowed them to come into manifestation on a large scale until maybe about 300 years ago. That was when the world went through one of those major seismic shifts in consciousness that we now call the Enlightenment. The people who grabbed a hold of this freedom principle, they were regarded as radicals. They were revolutionaries. They called this time the Enlightenment, by the way, because people were starting to wake up. They were starting to wake up to a greater and a more beneficial reality. They were waking up to the realm of divine ideas, actually, having a whole new concept of freedom and liberty. Take a look at this passage from the Declaration of Independence. See how this fits in with the concept of divine ideas. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's a divine idea. It's a perfect example of what we call a divine idea, timeless, a self-evident truth that transcends our physical circumstances, and something that seems to happen a lot when a divine idea comes along is that we don't fully get it at first. What often happens when a divine idea bursts onto the scene, as it did during the Enlightenment and as it did when it was brought into the founding documents of this country, what often happens is that the idea tends to be way beyond our capacity to fully understand and put into effect right away. Or as they sometimes say, our reach exceeds our grasp. We don't quite get it at first. It's too big to completely comprehend or embody at first, and that might explain why Jefferson and some of the other founders who wrote the Declaration talking about freedom and liberty still continued to own slaves. We have to work on it, and we can never give in to complacency or think that our understanding is somehow complete. It eventually took hundreds of years for freedom to apply to the people who used to be excluded, and I kind of have a feeling that we have more work to do. There are always more ways to extend the concepts of liberty and freedom to those around us. And we can't just stay focused on what's around us and out there. We have to also keep in mind the all-important inner realm, which is where divine ideas take hold in human beings, in consciousness. That's where we have to comprehend them at first. So we have to find them within. So there's the inner realm and there's the outer realm. We're good at celebrating the outer, but sometimes we need to turn around and focus within. And I think we might perhaps be in the midst of another form of enlightenment, because we're starting to realize that the true source of our freedom and liberation doesn't come from someplace outside. It's actually within each one of us. I don't think we can achieve the highest potential of any divine idea, and particularly freedom, until we find its perfect expression within ourselves. And this is something that comes from, again, some of the foundational unity teachings. I mentioned this book last week, Lessons in Truth by Harriet Emily Cady, written in the late 1800s. And the first chapter in the book is entitled, Liberty or Bondage? Which? Question mark. Liberty or bondage? Which? And she talks about this idea of liberation and freedom at the level of consciousness, the inner realm. So here's what she writes, speaking in that 1800 style of English that nobody uses anymore. Hitherto, who has said hitherto lately? Still, it's great. Hitherto, we have believed that we were helped and comforted by others, that we received joy from outside circumstances and surroundings. But it is not so. All joy and strength and good spring up from a fountain within one's own being. And if we only knew this truth, we should know that because God in us is the fountain out of which springs all our good, nothing that anyone does or says or fails to do or say can take away our joy and good. Most of us have believed ourselves not only the slaves of circumstances, but also, at best, the servants of the Most High. Neither belief is true. Those were radical and revolutionary words back in those days, because everybody looked upon God as being some kind of a divine slave owner, a lord to whom you would bow in fear and subservience. And she was here to say, not so. There is a form of freedom and liberation that we haven't begun to discover yet. Over 100 years, that's over 100 years after the Declaration of Independence, Emily Cady's giving us this other perspective on freedom. And I find it remarkable that she could speak so freely and with this level of confidence and authority, because at the time she was writing this, remember that women were in on a whole different rung of the socioeconomic ladder. They didn't even have the right to vote yet, could barely own property, and so on and so forth. But I think what she was doing is she was practicing what she was preaching there, because she found within her the unshakable conviction that her good, her joy, her freedom didn't come from outside circumstances and surroundings. As she said, all joy, all freedom, all strength comes from within, and it's not just a little trickle like a dried up creek, it's a fountain. And she calls that fountain God, which is our connection to the realm of divine ideas. That's what she's saying there. Now, you can call the fountain whatever you choose to. God is okay. Spirit, principle, reason, natural law, Fred. I mean, the name doesn't so much matter. Strength and freedom come from within, and nothing that anyone says or does or fails to do or say can take away our joy and good. That's kind of a nice affirmation to keep in mind sometimes when things get rough. And maybe at first all of this sounds a little bit, I don't know, too rose-colored glasses, self-serving, self-centered maybe, but consider this. What do you think might happen if we could cultivate within ourselves this unshakable conviction that our strength, our freedom come from within, and that no one and no thing can take it away from us? What we might end up doing, perhaps, is liberating others. If we can do it, they can do it. We can liberate them from that limited state of consciousness that sees people, that sees circumstances as limiting, people who surrender their freedom to things like custom and tradition, or views those things as being obstacles to our own strength and freedom. So Emily Cady issued this challenge over 100 years ago. She said, liberty or bondage? Which? We get to choose. And remember that the moral imperative is also to do for others what we would do for ourselves, or what we would have done for ourselves. So this inner search, this search for the inner realm of freedom and strength is something that fits into this pattern, this other divine idea that we call the golden rule. We're going to do unto others as we would have them do unto us. So I guess the message here is that all of these external trappings of freedom are of little benefit if we aren't free in our own mind first. So, this 4th of July, feel free to buck tradition and connect with whatever it is that brings a sense of joy and good to you and others, those around you. Serve sushi instead of hot dogs, you know. Put some pineapple on your pizza, whatever it happens to be. Whatever it happens to be, don't be afraid to buck tradition, and remember that liberty or bondage is the choice that we make, and it's an inner job. We'll see you next week.